Hello, this is Morteza Kordi, and in this tutorial, I'm going to talk about async task. Async task is an abstract class in Android that allows us to actually operate or do the heavy operations in the background thread. So what is the background thread? What is the UI thread? So you can see that we have the main thread or the UI thread here, right? So this is the final version of the application that we are going to build. This is going to be an online quiz application. So here you can see that we have the main thread. So what is the main thread? The main thread is the user interface thread. The user interface thread is where we interact with the user interface components of our application. So for example, here we have this app and we have this flower image here, right? I can interact with this button. So because our application is an online application, we must have an internet connection. If there is no an internet connection, the application is going to actually give you an alert. So for example, let me just turn off the internet connection of my emulator by just clicking on this LTE here. So you can also open the settings application and then turn off the internet connection. Now let me click on this button here. It's showing us an alert. It says network error. Check your internet connection. So now let me just turn on the internet connection here. Now let's click on this flower button here, this image. Now you can see it is actually showing us a progress bar. This means that the heavy operations, the downloading process of downloading the image and the texts of our buttons. So you can see that we have the image here and we have the texts of these buttons. We are downloading all of these from the internet. So when this operation, this is called a heavy operation, right? This is a time-taking operation. And this operation, this process must be executed in the background. Otherwise, our application is going to freeze. What does that mean? This means if this heavy operation is being executed in the main thread or the user interface thread, the user cannot actually interact with the user interface. And in that case, this means that our application is freezed and our application is going to be crashed, or the user may think that the application is crashed because the heavy operation is being executed in the main thread. And the next thing you know, the user is going to uninstall the app on his or her device because your application could not handle heavy operations. So that's why we use a background thread. In order to execute the heavy operations, the process of downloading an image or anything from the internet must be executed in the background thread, not in the UI thread or the main thread, so that the user can easily interact with the user interface, or the user can see that the user interface is actually being busy, for example, showing that progress bar, and the user knows that he or she should wait so that something is going to happen when the downloading process is finished. So for example, we have this image and we have the texts of these buttons. And here, one of these texts is actually the name of this flower or plant. So for example, let's choose one of them. As you can see, I chose the wrong option, and the right option is this one, this button. And if I click on this one, you can see that it says right. Now it says tap on flower to see the next question. If I click on this flower here again, now it is going to execute the heavy operation, the process of downloading the image and the texts of these buttons from the internet. So now the user knows that he or she must wait so that the downloading process is finished. So let's wait. You can see now another image, some other text here. So let's go back to Android Studio. Now here, because we are going to build this application, first, let me talk about the async task, the process of downloading something from the internet and how that process should be executed in the background thread. So inside this main activity class, let's scroll down here. And here you can see that we have these functions. So we don't want to do anything with these functions. We can delete them. So we have this one on create option menu. I'm just highlighting this function. the opening curly brace followed by a closing curly brace. Let's delete this function. And we have also this one, on options item selected. So let's also delete this function. I'll talk more about menus later. For now, just don't worry about these functions here. So I am inside the curly braces of this main activity class. So before the ending curly brace of this main activity class, as you can see, when I click on this ending curly brace here, it is showing me that this is the ending curly brace of this main activity class. I am going to just create an inner class. So we have inner. So in order to create an inner class, a class that is created inside another class, we must put the inner keyword. And we are going to say class. And here we need to specify the name of the class. The name is going to be downloading plant task. Okay, downloading plant task. Colon. So this class, this inner class, must extend or inherit from the async task class, which is a which is an abstract class. So choose this class, async task, and we put a pair of angle brackets here. We need to specify some parameters for this class. So the first parameter is going to be the parameter that we pass to this async task. So we are going to pass some strings to this async task. So how do I know that it is going to be string? So let me show you the JSON file. So here it is, the JSON file, or in other words, this is going to be the online database, and the process of downloading the images and the text, our buttons, is going to be actually from this database here, you can see. So you need to enter this URL. We are going to use this URL in order to access this JSON file, plantplaces.com/perl/mobile/flashcard.pl. So make sure that you actually use this URL. And in order to see the JSON data in a way that is much more human readable, I have installed the JSON viewer extension on my Chrome. So in order to download this extension, you just need to click on this ellipsis button and then click on more tools and then click on extensions. And then just scroll down here, click on get more extensions. So then the extension store is going to be opened for you here. So here it is, the Chrome web store. Inside the search bar, I can just search for JSON viewer. So let's search for the JSON viewer and let's wait. So here it is, the JSON viewer, some other extensions. You can just install one of these extensions and then you will be able to see the just the JSON data much more readable. Or if you want to, you can just search for the JSON viewer applications in the Google, and then you will find some websites that are going to help you to see the JSON data. And if you are using Firefox web browser, you can again download an extension for your specific web browser and use it in order to see the JSON data. And let me show you an online application that is going to help you to see the JSON. So here in the Google, I just searched for JSON viewer, and this is the first link that appears here, online JSON viewer. So I just need to click on it, and here it says jsonviewer.stack.hu, right? So here you can see that it says copy. I just need to copy and paste the JSON data here, and I just need to click on format. So let me close this tab and the extension tab. So here it is, our JSON data. So earlier I talked about how we know that the parameters that we are going to pass to our async task class is going to be of type string. Let me show you the JSON data here first. You can see that we have an opening curly brace, and we have at the bottom of the file. So let me show you the bottom of the file. So, and we have actually a closing curly brace. So the curly braces in JSON means JSON object. This means that we have an object, right? So whenever you see curly braces, this means that we have JSON object. So let me go to the top again. And here we have a JSON object. This is going to be the top JSON object that contains other JSON objects. We have the values. So the values here is actually a type of filter, right? So when we talk about filter, we can just imply that it is of type string. Okay, and here you can see that this values colon, we have a bracket. Whenever you see a bracket in JSON, this means that we have an array. So curly braces mean JSON object, bracket means JSON array. So we have values that contains an array, and again we have some curly braces, an array of JSON objects, an opening curly brace followed by a closing curly brace. Inside the curly braces you can see some data, for example the ID, plant. So these are all filters. When we talk about filters, we can imply that this may be actually a string. So let's go back to Android Studio. And here you can see that we have async task. So for the first parameter, I'm going to just put string here. We need to pass 3 parameters to this async task class. So I just put a comma here. The second parameter is going to be of type integer. And the second parameter is going to specify the on progress update. So for example, when the process of the downloading data from the internet is actually started, we are going to show the user that the process is being updated. We need to somehow show the user that process. In this application, we are not going to use the on progress updates, that there is a method for that, but we can specify that data type here, integer. Just put an integer here, comma. So let me show you the final version of the application. So let me click on this flower here. You can see that it is actually a progress bar, right? So this means that the application, it is actually updated in order to show the updated data here. So that's why we use this integer here, but we are not going to use the on progress data. We are going to use another way in order to show the user that the process of downloading the image and the text from the internet is being updated. So I'll talk more about this later. For now, I just wanted to let you know that the second parameter is for the on progress update method. And finally, we need to specify the third parameter. The third parameter is going to be the returned value, the data type of the returned value of the async task. So in this case, we have some texts here, right? This means that we are going to get the texts from the JSON data. I'll talk more about this image later. We are going to create another inner class for this image because this is actually completely another different task. But for this task, downloading plant task, we are going to only download the texts of our buttons, or in other words, the name of the plants. Let me show you the JSON data here. So for example, here are the JSON objects. And here we have the ID of the JSON object, which is number 24. This is going to be integer. The plant, which is number 9. Here, this plant is going to be the global identifier. We are going to get these data, for example, genus, species, we have cultivar, common, and we have the picture name. So this is going to be for our another task, the downloading photo task. So we can see that this is the link, and we have the description. We are going to get some of these data, for example, genus, species, or the global identifier, the plant here, which is number 9. So we need this data. So we are going to just retrieve this data as a plant object that we are going to create inside our project. So let's go back to Android Studio. Here, as the final parameter, we are going to specify the plant that we haven't created yet. So this is going to be the data type of the returned value of this async task, of this downloading process. So when we download these objects, we are going to download a specific object from the internet. So we are going to just name it as a plant object, right? So let's go back to Android Studio. So this is going to be the returned value. We are going to create this class in the next tutorial, okay? So here, there is another problem here. Let me show you the JSON data. Here you can see that we are not going to only download one object or 2 or 3. We are going to download all of these objects that we have inside this JSON file here, all of them, right? You can see that we have hundreds of these objects, and we are going to download all of them. And by using the plant object here, the plant class, as the returned value, that doesn't make sense. We need to have a list. We are going to download a list of plant objects. A list is actually an interface. and it is actually the same as an array. So we are going to use a list here, and we put the plant inside the angle brackets. This means that we are going to download a list of plant objects here. So here you can see I put list and I put the plant inside the angle brackets of this list, and we have this final angle bracket for this async task here. And in this way, we are specifying the returned value of our async task is going to be a list of plant objects, because we are going to download all of these plant objects. And let me show you the final version of the application, the plant quiz app. So for example, if I click on this flower app here, this flower button, you can see every time that I click on this flower button, a new image is going to be shown to the user. This means that if the user just starts playing with this quiz for about a week or 2 weeks, every time that the user clicks on this flower button here, he or she is going to see a new image, a new quiz test, right? So let's go back to Android Studio, and here we need to put a pair of parentheses after the angle brackets of our async task, and then we need to open and close our class by using these curly braces. An opening curly brace followed by a closing curly brace. So now I'm going to talk about the methods of this async task class. So because our downloading plant task class is inheriting from this async task, this means that the downloading plant task is actually an async task, right? Async task means actually doing the processes, heavy processes in the background thread. So this async task is actually an abstract class, right? So this means that we need to implement the methods that are declared inside this abstract class. The first method that this downloading plant task class must implement inside the body of this class is going to be the do in background method. So here you can see it, because we are implementing this abstract method from this async task class. Here you can see that there is no implementation for this method because it is abstract, and we as a developer, our class, according to our processes and how we want to do the background operations, we must provide implementations for this method, right? So here we have this to do, and it says reason not implemented. So we don't need this line here, just delete it. And here you can see that we have this override keyword. This means that we are getting this function from this async task and we are overriding it in order to put some other operations inside this function, some other processes according to our own application. And that's why you can see that there is no implementation for this do in background method. And here we have an error. It says the list inside the angle brackets here. It is referring to the returned data type. So because we haven't still created the plant class inside our project, it didn't put this class here. We need to put it manually here. So just type in here plant. Okay. So now let's take a look at this function. We have override. This means that we are overriding this function and we are getting this function from the async task class. Fun, do in background. So it is self-explanatory. The function do in background is going to be executed in another thread, in the background thread, so that the main thread or the user interface thread is not blocked. We have actually this parameter, var are params, and it is of type string question mark. So it is actually nullable or optional. So in Kotlin, we call it nullable. And the reason that I call it sometimes optional is that I'm come from the Swift programming language, and in that language we call these nullable types as optional. So here we call it nullable. This means that this parameter can be null. It is okay to be null, and it could be null, and if this parameter is null, our application is not going to be crashed. So here it says var arg. Var arg means that it is kind of an array. We are going to get the data, for example, the JSON object inside an array. Inside that array, we are going to have, for example, the first JSON object. So in order to access that JSON object, we just need to say params, and then we put brackets and we put the index number 0 in order to access that JSON object. So that's why it is called var arg. And here you can see the return type. And we are going to implement this function later, actually in the next tutorial. So let's go after the ending curly brace of this function. Inside this curly braces of this downloading a plant task inner class, we need to implement another method that is called onPostExecute. So just type in here onPostExecute. Again, this method is come from the async task. You can see the override keyword fun onPostExecute. The onPostExecute can access the user interface. The do in background method cannot access the user interface, but the onPostExecute can access the user interface, and that's why it is called onPostExecute. The execution is actually being performed after the do in background method. So let me show you my emulator. So for example, when the downloading process of these text, the plant names, and this image is finished, the onPostExecute is going to be called, and then we can show the downloaded data from the internet to the user inside this user interface thread. So the do in background method can access the background thread, not the user interface thread. But the onPostExecute method can only access the user interface thread, and it cannot access the background thread. So let me create a comment here. So here it is, the comments. The do in background thread can access the background thread, not user interface thread, and the onPostExecute method can access user interface thread, not background thread. So here again, you can see that for this onPostExecute method, here we have this parameter. This is very important. The onPostExecute method comes with a parameter, result. And here it says list of, so inside the angle brackets, just type in here plant. This means, this is very important. The doing background method returns a list of plants, the returned value. But this returned value, this list, is going to be the input value of this onPostExecute method, the parameter. So when this doing background method is executed completely, the returned value is going to be passed automatically to this onPostExecute method. So this onPostExecute method has access to the list of plants that we get from this doing background method. So let's see the final version of the app. And here, if I click on this flower button, you can see now it's going to download the image and the plant names from the internet. When this process is finished, so let's wait a little bit here. When this process is finished, the onPostExecute method is called, and the returned values are passed to this onPostExecute method. We have the result as the list of plants. And then inside this onPostExecute method that has access to the user interface thread, we can update our user interface. We can specify the image, the new image, the plant names here, right? That's it. That's how the async task is actually executed in Android. So that's enough for this tutorial. In the next tutorial, we are going to learn about actually creating objects, classes in Android. And most importantly, we are going to create the plant class. Thank you very much for watching. If you have any questions about these topics that I've taught you so far, please post a discussion in the course, and then I'll do my best to answer all of your questions. And I look forward to seeing you in the next tutorial.